Hey there, I'm Dr. Jill Wener. I am a physician, meditation teacher, tapping practitioner, author, and aspiring anti-racist. And I am so excited to have Martin Shepard here. He is the founder and CEO of Arc Access Control, which is provides physical and cybersecurity solutions, and they do much more technical things than that I don't understand. So we may go into some of that. He's also the co-founder of EARN, which is the Executive Action Response Network, that is a anti-racism activist group company that we'll get into. He's also a lawyer by training and is obviously now more in the corporate space. Martin, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today.
Well, thank you, Jill. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Well, it is my pleasure. So let's start a little bit with your personal journey professionally, but since this is an anti-racism discussion, if you're open to sharing some of your experiences with race and racism and how that may have formed what you do now professionally with ARC Access, in the non-anti-racism space, but also with EARN.
Yeah, I mean, I am a Black American born in the 1970s, raised by parents who came through the civil rights movement in America, right? So race is in there in the foundations and dealing with racism in this country, and standing for yourself as a Black human being, whether it's in regular social public life and public accommodation, or in your professional life and executive journey. Unfortunately, 60 years, 70 years after Dr. King got his start and made such an impression on the world, we are still, and I think King and Malcolm worried about this and spoke about it, we're still dealing with the vestiges of slavery, the transatlantic slave trade, Jim Crow. Those things are still here, and you cannot live in this country as a Black person and not be touched by it. Now, so the question becomes, what do you do, right? And so to get back to your question, very early on in life, I found refuge in hip hop music and some of my favorite early groups, Boogie Down Production and KRS-One and Public Enemy and X-Clan. They were speaking about these crazy, perspectives on how America treated us and how America maybe should treat us, and giving, I think, young people like myself a background, if not a complete background, giving us the intellectual curiosity to go and figure out this past and what we should do moving forward. And so as a college student, I was a student activist, was arrested a couple times, stirred up a little trouble, but also was able, it was good trouble, as John Lewis would say, and also was able to be a part of a group of people who ushered in real change at the university that I attended. So, and beyond that, the struggle is truly a day-to-day. I've always had mentors. I've always mentored younger folks, and always really pressed on folks to be conscious and aware of helping other Black folks in similar situations to be able to achieve the things that they're trying to achieve. So activism and taking a stand has always been in there somewhere.
It's always, that's great. What kind of stuff, where did you go to college and what kind of stuff did you?
I went to a small Midwestern college. No, I went to Miami University in Oxford, Ohio.
Oh, Miami, Ohio. Okay, that's like I just said that so fast. I don't even know if I said the middle syllables. Miami of Ohio.
Miami of Ohio, yes. We call it Miami University, full stop. The University of Miami is a little school in Miami, Florida, that is not quite the caliber of Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. We say Miami University was a university before Florida was even a state. That's what we say. And
All right. I like that. I went to Northwestern and we used to call it the Harvard of the Midwest. So that gives you, we used to, we had some things that we said about it, but
Miami was known, I think still is known as one of 12 or 13 public Ivies. So
I
we
love that.
own snobbish ways about us Miami alums. So yeah.
I'm just thinking of, oh God, what we would chant at football games because we just were sad about our football skills. But anyway, well, different interview.
Northwestern is not known for its football, although a connection. Northwestern head coach Randy Walker, rest in peace, may he rest in peace, was before he was at Northwestern, was the coach at Miami University. He coached while I was at Miami.
Oh,
Miami and went to Northwestern.
awesome. Wait, when did you graduate? We're so off topic, but
1998.
okay, so you're a year older than me. We had Gary Barnett for a time when I was there. Maybe
Yep,
he was.
I remember Gary Barnett.
Okay, so obviously this is a football podcast, so we're going to keep talking about football the whole time. So at Miami University, what kind of good trouble did you get into in activism, and what was that like? Because I think the term activist is it carries such this what's the opposite of stigma? It's this really, I don't know, it's this aspirational word. And I remember when I went on the anti-racism retreat 2 years ago, I was like, oh God, what if they expect me to be an activist? I don't know, that word to me sounds like this unattainable magic land of coolness and bravery and courage. And I resist using that word for myself, because for me it's this like image of people marching in the streets and getting arrested and doing like the real work. And I'm fascinated by the work, by the word and by the work. So what kind of stuff did you do?
I was marching in the streets and getting arrested. I mean, that's you hit the nail on the head.
Mm-hmm.
I think activism, I would tend to agree, although I think there are circles out there that also sort of negatively stigmatize the word as well. There is, a very powerful, there are very powerful systems at play in our day-to-day lives. And when you're a student at a big state-run university, you can bump into some of that system and maybe you don't agree with how it works. And at the time, there were, I think, 2.5% Black students at Miami University, something along those lines. And so we felt like there should be a different effort to recruit students of color, specifically African-American students. And we also felt like those of us who were there should have been afforded better accommodation and cultural sensitivity on campus and afforded more opportunities on campus. And, we distilled that into some action items, some demands. And then to be heard, sometimes, you got to go the extra mile. If they won't hear you, you got to make them hear you. And we developed a couple different strategies to get out and get noticed and get the press involved, got the national press involved, and got arrested, went to trial, was acquitted. But through all that, you're putting information in front of the public, and the public gets to see what's going on at this small little town. Miami is a great school, fantastic school. I have nothing but love for the years that I was there, administration. But the system, and this is something, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit with the EARN discussion, it's not the people always, right? Like it is inertia built into the gears of the bigger machine, and the people sometimes are just stewards of the machine, cogs, if even that. And the machine has been used to running the way that it's running, and until you really throw a wrench in there, it'll continue to grind away and grind away. And so I think activism then is just the visionary ability to see that things are not quite the way that they are supposed to be, and then the ability to get a to get a critical mass of people to see
Yeah.
different and better.
Yeah. I think that's, I think getting that people to see, like, lead the change that affects it. That's what distinguishes, I think, and makes you an activist, makes one an activist. I like that definition. What does anti-racism mean to you?
Anti-racism. Wow. Oh, that's so much to unpack. It's like a word with a prefix, and you have to look historically at the word, the sentiment around what racism means. What is racism? Race is in itself is a fallacy. It's a fiction. Race is a social construct that only has value when you can fool people into believing the value that you're trying to project onto it. The anti-racism is telling the truth about humanity and who we are as individuals, as people within a functioning civil society, within the systems that uphold that civil society. It's telling the truth that race is a fallacy, that however you've been indoctrinated about people who are different than you, if that indoctrination includes something that is scary or negative, or that it's wrong. I mean, in every instance, that it's wrong. And fundamentally, in America, in the United States of America, anti-racism is an effort to end white supremacist culture in our institutions and organizations.
I love that. Telling the truth about humanity within the systems.
It's the truth. I mean,
Yeah.
we have, I hate this language because it doesn't feel authentic, but this is real, and it's coming from me, a Black man in America. I have friends who are white, right? You hear it sometimes. I have friends who are Black. I have dear friends. My oldest son's godfather is a white man. We know that we're not different in the way that people who may have voted a certain way in this last election think that they are different. We know that that's not true, right? How is it that continues to persist? And then anti-racism is just like, how do you cut that off at the pass and enlighten people in a way that moves us past those shortcomings as a nation?
Yeah. I find myself getting, there's different schools of thought. Do you change people's minds and then try to change the policy? Or Ibram Kendi says, change the policy first and then it changes people's minds. Like with Obamacare, it got passed and then people were like, oh, that's actually kind of cool that we have, white people who were against it were then like, hey, that's pretty rad that I have free healthcare or affordable healthcare. And I agree with like everything he says, and I agree with that concept too, but I also feel like if we don't change the mindset, we end up creating policies that are sometimes well-intending, but often perpetuating racism, such as like No Child Left Behind, which I'm not a policy expert on that. Segregation of schools. We look back on that. I've learned, I always look back on that as like, yay, not the day racism ended. I wasn't that stupid, but I was pretty ignorant, but not that ignorant. But thinking that it was well-intended, or I think it wasn't even well-intended. It was designed to get Black kids closer to white kids so they could be better. Right. So it wasn't even that. And then it ended up taking away, from my understanding, like Black people's ability to have their own spaces, like integration isn't actually the good thing that white people are taught that it is. And maybe Black people are taught that too. So
there's
what are your thoughts about that?
to unpack there, right?
Yeah.
that has a whole, we need a separate podcast for all that, but I think you got to do both, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of the short answer. I think the challenge, if we're talking politics, since it sounds like we bet that corner, um, Joe Biden's principal challenge is going to be to to conceive of what you give the American people that brings the American people together. Because I agree, um, if you change policy, if you paint everything with one color and it's beneficial for everyone who's been painted, then that's a good thing, and it has the potential to help change people's minds. But those things alone can't change. Obamacare didn't change people's minds, right?
Yeah.
Like, so you also have to you have to work on changing people's minds. The problem has been that that has not been an effort, a top-down effort, right? You know, at one point, it was legal to own chattel slaves, right? To own human beings. And then at one point it wasn't, but it was okay in places of public accommodation to send Black people around back to the alley, right? Or what have you. And then that wasn't okay, but it was okay not to allow them into your union or not to hire them. And then that wasn't okay. But at no point in that time continuum did anyone ever say, like, look, let's create some structure to this and let's disassemble race and racism and the structures of racism in this country. That never really happened. And I think to change people's minds, there has to be that sort of enlightened leadership on the subject. It's not just enough to have the great poets and griots in the African American community talk about it in their sermons and in their art. It's not just enough to have a couple of ambassadors here and there who are willing to, white folks who are willing to talk about it. I think it has to be a conscious effort. There have been other countries who have embarked on, you think of Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa after apartheid. It's possible to do. This country has never resolved to take that journey. And I don't know, I worry about that, right? You know, market-based capitalism is like, you know, let the invisible hand control. And, you know, that seeps into all of American life. You know, it's in the church, it's in the corner store, it's everywhere, right? That sort of that basis for how you operate. And I worry that America as a society is really just says, like, this will take care of itself somehow, because it won't. I mean, there has to be intentionality behind resolving systems and structures, institutions of racism.
Yeah, yeah. And that also, that pointing the finger, it's that other person's problem, or that other institution's problem, or that's not what I do. That's not what I'm propagating or perpetuating. I think that's such a big issue, not taking ownership for it.
Not taking ownership, and understand, this is, I said it before, we very intentionally, and we haven't introduced EARN, well, you introduced EARN, but we haven't given it foundation here, but in putting together the concept, we very intentionally were talking to the institutions. We're not talking to the individuals. We know a lot of the individuals, and we know that they are not bad people, that they're not necessarily racist people. But we also understand that the way that this thing has been set up doesn't work for us. And to raise the consciousness of the people who run these organizations, you've got to start somewhere. And I think a good place to start is at how these organizations have historically run, how they can continue to run in order to kind of keep ambitious. Is that the word I'm looking for? Ambitious African American folks at bay and keep them from opportunities.
How about like valuable?
Like, I mean, I was looking because ambitious,
worthwhile, like
worthwhile. There we go. people who are just capable and there,
Right.
right, should be exposed to opportunities. And ambitious is something different. Thank you for correcting that. That is absolutely right.
So let's talk about earn. So I've already interviewed George and Jessica, who are your co-founders, but talk a little bit about where the, like, what made you come up with the name? I know that, like, story, you all did a leadership program together for Black professionals, I believe, or Black executives. Just a little bit of the story of how it came together, and what your mission is, because I obviously know it, and so we're talking about it sort of familiar, in a sort of familiar way. But for people listening, what's so important about earn, and this, I think, the accountability step also, if you can talk about that.
Yeah, so earn was born out of George Robinson, Jessica Woods, and I all attended not attended, we all graduated from an executive leadership program at Carnegie Mellon Tepper School of Business. And just in getting to know each other through that time, I think spoken, unspoken, we knew we saw the world in a similar sort of a way, and saw the problems of the world in a similar sort of a way. And then lo and behold, 2020 comes around, and the world starts crumbling all at once with COVID, and obviously some of the social movements that happened in the wake of George Floyd. And the three of us were participating in these discussions and calls, and listening to some of our colleagues, and participating, and trying to put our perspective into the marketplace of ideas. And I can speak for me specifically. I was disappointed, overwhelmingly disappointed by the lack of urgency, the lack of energy and fire. I thought that what happened with George Floyd was so sinister and evil, and we don't all have the ability. I mentioned protesting in the streets. I was 19 or 20, right? I'm a 44-year-old man with a wife and children and responsibilities. That's not to say that we can't still go and protest in the street, but there has to be support for that effort. Those of us with executive skill and legal skill and other skills, and the ability to organize things outside of the street, we started to feel like we got to do something. It can't be the traditional model. It can't just be discussion around D&I. It's got to be something specifically for Black people in this country. Black people are suffering, dying at the highest rates from COVID and the pandemic, dying in the streets at the hands of police officers and excessive force. And then we also took note of a study that was done here in Pittsburgh by the University of Pittsburgh, a gender equity study. But the gender equity study revealed the conditions for Black Pittsburghers, and that those conditions resulted in the lowest quality of life amongst, I think, the 25 metropolitan areas that were surveyed, making Pittsburgh the worst place to live as a Black American. And so those three things, the gender equity study, COVID, and how COVID hit the Black community, and then the response to George Floyd, kind of spurred us to get together. We all went. George Robinson hosted. He didn't host it. It was another organization that hosted the skeet shooting event, but he invited us. We went and shot clay ducks, which I'm really bad at, but it was fun nonetheless. And while we were out there, we just started saying, hey, what are we going to do? We got to do something. And that was really the genesis and the birth of the Executive Action Response Network. Since then, I think you mentioned the accountability. we're still, I mean, this is, we're 4 or 5 months into it now. We're still iterating and sort of finalizing a business model. But as you well know, we have put some of the solution set together for what we're offering to corporations and to individuals who are aligned with our mission. And our mission, you asked about our mission. The mission is simply, and we have a mission, I don't know the mission statement by heart necessarily, but the mission very simply is to elevate African Americans into C-suite roles within corporate America, and to elevate entrepreneurs and Black businesses. It is outside of that simple mission statement. For me, we are making a very conscious effort to get Black business leaders into positions where they have control of some mechanisms of capital. Capital in a capitalist economy is necessary. And far too often, our Black executives don't sit in those positions where they're managing profit and loss, and Black entrepreneurs don't have access to the capital that they need in order to run sustainable businesses.
I love that you all are, it's like everyone can put a little statement on their website that I support Black lives, we support Black lives. And I noticed even like my CSA in my neighborhood, which is, I love them. They had that, and then their newsletter every week, it's still in there, but it gets further and further down, and it has because it's like right below the vegetables for purchase this week, and buy the goat cheese from this farm, and it's like, and P.S. we still support Black lives. And it's so easy to, that's the whole thing is for white people, it's so ridiculously hard to say these things, to even put that thing of support up until George Floyd came, and then it's like the cool thing to do. But then what do you do with that? And how do you step up? How do you follow through and actually make real changes that make you uncomfortable and that let go of you, meaning white people? So make us uncomfortable, make us let go of some of our power and privilege when it hurts the most, recognizing that that's exactly what needs to be done. What have you all come up against since because I'm sure a lot of people are like, yeah, let's do this. And then they're like, oh, we have to spend money on this. What has it been like for you all as you're getting things going?
It's interesting because I agree with that perspective that, and we knew that, I think strategically we knew going in, you got a fire that's lit right now with George Floyd. How do you keep the fire burning is really the question. It's weird. There are several worlds in the executive and in the corporate space that all existed at the same time. You have the organizations themselves that have to do and say what's best for sustainability, for their revenue, right? For the customer base and for the people they serve. They have to do and say the right things for fear of losing market share. Then you have the leaders in those organizations who I think some of those leaders have started to emerge. Some of those well-intentioned folks who know that the stuff that's going on is wrong, those people have started to emerge in some of the largest corporations in America, in the world. And so you got that. But then you have, and this is a dynamic that the EARN founders understand really well, and we bumped into, then you have the would-be African-American executive constituency who stand to benefit from the type of advocacy that we have initiated, who are almost, I mean, you can't say this about everybody, but the type of people we're talking about, they are high potential people, overachievers, overeducated, right? These are rock star type people, but they exist in a world where they probably don't have a mentor of color within their organization, or maybe no mentor at all. They have limited access to the executives that run the company, or limited relationships with those folks. Even their colleagues and the people around them and the people who report to them, there are very few people to support them and support their vision and the things that they say and do. And so it becomes a significant risk for them to align with what EARN has put in motion, because what EARN has put in motion is point blank, we're telling you that you should do something, and here are the 7 or 8 things that we recommend that you do as the beginning of best practices. You need to hire a African-American C-suite executive today. If you don't have one, you need to do it immediately, right? That's not comfortable for anybody. Like, who are you, Martin Shepard, to tell me that I need to hire a Black C-suite executive? Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without demand. Never has, and it never will. It's always been the case. If EARN doesn't come along and demand things, things will never change in organizations like EARN. And so of those 3 groups, I think we found the most difficulty in our constituent, our colleagues, and convincing them that what we're doing is not going away, that we're going to be here, and we're going to put a sustained effort in front of people, and we're going to make a difference, and that there's not going to be a risk to you as a professional or your role within your organization. We can't promise that. We don't know. I can tell you this, if I take off the businessman hat and put on the lawyer hat, and I take myself back into the corporate sphere, and I say, yes, I align with EARN, and I tell my CEO, I align with EARN, and I think you guys should do some of this stuff they've done. And my CEO gets rid of me because I've said that my CEO and the organization have a problem for firing somebody who's in a protected class. Like, but that's, that's not the easiest message to deliver to people or for them to understand and accept. People just want to go and do a good job in their role and then be elevated based upon their merits. And I get that. So I think our strategy is really not, it's aimed to benefit that group of people, but we understand the limitations there. Some of what we want to do is take the burden off of that group of people, because very frequently those organizations say, hey, where is our high potential Black person or 2 around here? We've got a problem with race right now. Let's give them the problem and have them figure it out. I've been in that situation before. Everybody who's a Black executive has been in that position before, where you get pulled into a committee to run, or you get pulled into a ERG to run. That can be time consuming in and of itself. It never adequately compensates you for the time, effort, and energy it takes to be successful at those things. We're saying, hey, let EARN step in and be part of that solution set and take some of that off of the individuals who might be burdened with that. The other thing that we're saying, and you hit on it earlier, is if you are a corporation who has said we're going to give $100 million or $1 trillion, or I'm being facetious, we're going to give a bunch of money to social justice causes, we're saying, hey, that's great. Let's hold you accountable for the things that you say you're going to do. Yeah. And be a removed third party that helps you keep track of that on one hand, but then also hold you accountable for doing the things that you've said you're going to do in your corporate CSR or wherever you make that commitment.
I think I have all sorts of thoughts and all sorts of questions, but I have a lot of empathy for the Black colleagues who are not wanting to rock the boat. I've been in multiracial groups where we start talking about safe spaces, and white people want to be made feel, like we think safe space is a good thing, but for Black people, that's like, okay, that's a blanket statement that I shouldn't have made. For a lot of the Black people I've encountered in this spaces, it's like, safe for you is different than safe for me. And I've heard some people say, I only feel safe when I'm with other Black people. And even when I have people come on the podcast, you know, I usually try to reassure people, and you and I know each other, so I didn't say this already, but like, you don't have to, you can say whatever you want. You don't have to censor yourself. You're not going to offend me. If you do, that's good, because then I can like model behavior, hopefully, of a white person who's taken aback by something about race and most likely wrong, and how to process it. But I actually can't tell a Black person that they're safe, even on this, because it's going out into the world. It's being published. And even though I don't have a 7 million person following, I had one of my interviewees who doesn't do racial work professionally. She said, can you just not publish that? Because I'm afraid that my future employer is going to hear this. And she's a very outspoken, incredible woman, but she just was like, that was too much. I didn't want to put myself out there that way. And so I can say you're safe, right, but I can't, you know, right, and for me to presume that I know what that means or looks like is very fraught.
Yeah, I mean, so, some of it is agency, right? Like some of it you have to establish and take. You just have to. I mean, you don't have to, right? But if you don't, what are the consequences for not establishing that agency in this world, in this life?
Yeah.
I am, when I get to the point, I have good friends and advisors and people around me, most notably Ingrid Elizabeth Shepherd, I love you, who will tell me when I'm off the rails and I'm not thinking the right thoughts. But you know, in this effort, we're talking about a problem that most everyone agrees on. I think even the people who might not agree that something needs to be done, they can agree that something very wrong has been done to the African in America. Everybody can agree on that. I'm just saying that something should be done about it. And guess what? I have an opinion on what should be done about it. And here it is. Feel free to differ with that opinion, right? But if you do, number one, at this stage of the game, I'm probably going to push you to the end of the line and work with people who can see a pretty similar vision to the things that we're putting forward. We're not asking for things that are unreasonable, unjustified, or ridiculous. I don't think anybody should be put into a position at a large corporation that's not qualified. That would be silly. I'm talking about putting people into roles that they are qualified to do and will be successful at, and making sure that those people are supported in those roles. That's the journey that we're really on here, is righting some of these wrongs with the agency that we are taking. This is a strange, weird outcropping of this last 4 years of politics, is that you got to see a sociopath. Is that right? You know.
I think, and there's many words.
However,
sociopath, yeah, racist.
However you describe that, you got to see it openly on TV every day, right? This is someone who doesn't just take agency, but who bends the entire arc of the universe to their will. Like, the way that they see or understand things is the exclusive way that is. It's my understanding or no understanding. You still feel that happening right now because we don't have a conceding. He hasn't issued a concession to the new president-elect. But I think the outcropping of that is an understanding that, hey, I might not be crazy. I might not want people to believe my lies, but what's wrong with me just being able to speak my truth?
Yeah.
You know, what's wrong with that level of agency, particularly in the wake of some of your point, in the wake of some of the very prominent dangers that have become, that have been displayed to the American people on what it's like to live a day-to-day existence in Black or brown skin. It's a dangerous game out there for us, and I think one of the ways, again, back to earn, but one of the ways you start to reshape that world is you give individuals opportunity. Those individuals create a different space for their family. They provide a different opportunity for the people, their network around them, and that thing starts to grow. And you change some of this, at least, you change top down just by providing economic access to economic opportunity.
You mentioned before when Black executives get pulled into the D&I committees and all that, and you mentioned the extra energy and time, and I think that word energy is so important, because it's not just like going through the task of doing the thing, but can you talk more about the energy of what it takes to exist and baseline exist, but then also thrive as a person of color in society, in corporate America, in legal America? Because I think it's so important for white people to understand the difference in existence, just the baseline energy that it takes to be.
Yeah. I mean, the term that's come up in recent years has been authentic self in the workplace. Authentic self, like bring your authentic self. Mm-hmm. I have to be, my authentic self is more than one self. And if it's not more than one self, if I'm walking to my car in the parking lot and the police officer says, "Boy, what are you doing?" I better come up with an authentic self that's going to keep me from getting beat down, right? Mm. If I'm talking to a client, I better have an authentic self that can adjust and appeal to that person's what that person needs, but also give them a perception of me that is not dangerous or threatening in any way. That's real. I happen to not be the biggest guy in the world, but I see it in some of my friends who are in a similar position in their career as me. Oftentimes, if you're big, it prevents, and Black, it prevents a whole nother reality that you have to create another self. I have a friend whose voice changes. It's literally a protection mechanism. He's 6'4", 6'5", 280 pounds, a big dude. His voice changes when he's in these conversations to a high-pitched voice, just to make people feel comfortable enough to speak to him as a human being. And so I think that, the energy it takes to put on those many faces, and then you talk about succeeding in your role or within the roles that a company might give you, the energy that it takes. I mean, it's a sad reality, but you at this point in the game, you've got to put it all on the line to be successful at not just your job. You got to be a successful networker with people who might not understand you or have any interaction with people who are like you, which means you have to try to be a little bit more like them. That is exhausting. That is not something that I know. That is not something that similarly situated white executives or people in the workplace ever think about. They don't think about how I have to, minimize myself, mm-hmm. be heard or accepted. I think that women have a similar experience. I think white women have a similar experience. But it is an exhausting reality when you have to be more than just who you are. You have to be a prism, and you've got to refract the right light at the right time for whoever the audience is looking into the prism. It's a tough role to play.
That's such a beautiful, is it an analogy or a metaphor? The prism thing. Is that the first? Is that a new analogy for you? Is that something you've heard before? Because that's just so.
No, I just made that up. I'm a poet in my spare time.
You are. That's awesome. Yeah. So I think my partner is in business, and he talks about, we have all sorts of conversations about all the stuff that I've been getting getting more and more involved in, and there'll be white men in his job that are mad that the women, which is generally white women, getting these diversity jobs, which has been shown to just even further benefit white men for the most part, but that they're getting these jobs because they don't meet the qualifications. They're not as qualified. And we're having conversations of who has set the terms of what it means to be qualified for that job and what it means to be good at that job. White men. So that's the standard. So it's the white supremacy culture, white male culture that's setting that standard. And so trying to contend with that as a woman, as a Black person, as anyone that's not a white man, changing the standard, I think, and recognizing that because you having to be your authentic self at work is your most white self. Am I being?
Well, there's some nuance there, right?
Yeah.
There's value in being the one cool Black dude there's value in that too, right? So that's a balancing act.
Yeah.
But yeah, so one of Ern's recommendations, you've seen our letter, is for third-party HR consulting in your hiring practices because of that very issue, right?
Yeah.
What does it mean to be qualified for this? And why does it seem like maybe the things that are mandatory qualifiers are things that are the hardest things for Black candidates to be able to achieve or aspire to when they may not be necessary for the role,
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I appreciate what you said about being the cool Black guy at work, or, it seems as if the proximity to whiteness is what people have to play in order to get ahead, but there are so many nuances to that. So I thank you you weren't calling me out, but thank you for giving it more nuance that it deserves.
Well, that's the thing. The part of white supremacist culture in America has always included a connection to the exotic other, right? To whatever the character is in Black America, whether it's the brute or the Sambo or the mammy or whatever caricature has been created in the minds of the supremacists, there's always a connection to it, right? That is how you are able to create whiteness. I am not, if you're white, you're not that, right? I'm not, a mammy who's overweight and shuffling and can't read, or a Sambo who's just lazy and drink. I'm not that. That's who they are. That's not me. But I pass the Sambo on the street. The mammy takes care of my kids. The brute is who I tell my daughter to stay away from. Right. I've created enough distance, but have enough understanding of who they are. I don't know who the cool Black guy is in the stereotype, the panoply of Black stereotypes, but there is something there. I know I've experienced it. I'm sure others can relate to it. Just being the token. There it is. The Black relationship.
Will Smith.
Will Smith, right?
He's not a stereotype. He's a human, but like I could feel good about him. I could feel good about Obama. He plays basketball, So
it's real. It's real for sure.
Yeah, that's gosh. Well, I could keep asking you questions, but we're at the end of our hour.
Yeah, I hate to do it, and I've got a hard stop here too. This is fantastic. We should do this again soon.
I think we are doing this tomorrow. We're going to have the whole EARN team on tomorrow. So for anyone listening who wants to learn more and hear this incredible power trio of change makers, tune in. It'll probably be the week after this one. Hopefully by the time this actually is published in a couple weeks, we will have a concession, or we will not be in the middle of the Civil War. So we'll see what happens. But George Shepard, thank you so much again for joining me and for sharing your insight and knowledge and teaching us all. And have a wonderful evening.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jill. It was a pleasure.